Hello? Eva, is that you?
I'll start with the basic question, which is, where did the inspiration for the story come from?
Well, I actually had an idea for a story about parents whose daughter had gone missing a year before in New Zealand, and that we picked them up a year later to find out what had happened with the parents and where they were at with the search for the daughter. And then we just made my previous film, APRON STRINGS, which had an Indian aspect to it. And it occurred to me that if we set the story in India, it would really up the stakes. And I've got a sort of a lifelong love affair with India. And I was really just looking for a reason to go back there, so.
Do you actually put the full stop on the script, or is it exactly how you mentioned it with the producer?
Oh, I think you just reach a point where you know that you could go on forever, and you just have to hand it over. You've just got to let go of it. And in fact, up in India, I did this little ceremony the night before shooting started, and I printed out the script and I wrapped it in a sort of a white scarf, which has some ceremonial significance up there. And I handed it over to Nalan, the director, and said, right, it's yours now. And that actually felt quite good. I think it's something I might do with all future films, because as much as the writer might like to be hanging over the director's shoulder going, don't you think the camera would be better over there? I mean, I acknowledge that I'm not a director, so.
What's really cool, I find, about this film is that we're seeing these middle-class Kiwis, and at least one of them is pretty culturally ignorant about where they are. Yeah. And I don't feel like you ever really see New Zealanders portrayed in that way that often. What should writers be aware of when writing such a character?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. I guess you're saying that because New Zealanders are well-travelled and we like to think of ourselves as being culturally...
In part, yeah.
Yeah. So, well, the characters develop over such a period of time. The character of Carl, initially, I had him as someone who was really fearful about his daughter going out into the world, that they had a very close relationship. And going to India is almost his worst nightmare for Eva, because like a lot of people, he has this great fear of India. He's never been there, but I don't know, India seems to be the sort of place that people either go to and just absolutely fall in love with, or they just are terrified of and want to leave. And it is because everything there is so different. Certainly not as much as it was more than 30 years ago when I went for the first time. More and more of it now is the same. More and more of it now is more westernized, put it that way. So I think that is the interesting thing. Stepping into Carl's shoes is thinking about what it would be like to go and experience all those things in India that come as a shock the first time. Now for me, I've been many times. But things just like that journey from the airport to the hotel, the first time they ride in an Indian taxi, and it's over crazy roads and the driver's nuts. And that is just India. And by the end of the film, Carl takes another taxi and he's just chilled out in the back. He's not even noticing what's happening. And I guess that's what India does. After a little while, you either go, I can't stand this, I'm taking a flight home, or you get used to it. You accept that this is a different part of the world. This is a different world.
Are there cliches you see in Hollywood about how India is portrayed that maybe gets on your nerves, or?
Well, the thing with India is that it's so intensely photogenic and it's so colourful that I think it's really hard sometimes to get past that. to actually get beneath the Bollywood sort of surface and the larger than life stereotypes, yeah. And the thing with India is that everything that you say about it, you can also say the exact opposite and it will be true. You can say, India is this incredibly hot country. Well, go to the Himalayas, it's freezing. You can say India is a place of, mad overpopulation and crazy, heaving cities. Again, there's places of absolute peace and natural beauty. So I think, yeah, a lot of Hollywood's depiction of India is sort of very urban, and this was certainly never going to be that.
So, as a screenwriter, I'm going to assume that you're familiar with writer's block, and you've experienced it yourself. A lot of people, in order to get over that, they do something really mundane. Do you have anything like that to get to that sort of eureka moment?
I think with writer's block, one of the best things you can do is actually just walk away, put it aside, move on to another project, leave it alone just for a week, for 2 weeks, for 2 months, for a year, whatever however long you can stay away from it, stay away from it, even if it's just overnight. You need to let your subconscious do a lot of the work because there's so much that's going on under the surface that often something rises up. I find just going to the gym, getting on a cross trainer or something, and then I'd have to dash off into the loos and write notes because that's where it would come. Whereas I could sit at my desk and just be bashing my head against the computer or wanting to throw it out the window. But yeah, I mean, I think it's really important for writers to be working on more than one project. Now, I don't mean simultaneously. I can't do that myself. I think some people can. But with the process of writing drafts, it's really great if you can finish a draft, it goes out, other people read it, it goes to the film commission or, to the funders. You get feedback and notes. During that period, if you can kind of just put it completely out of your head and move on to another project, and sort of, if you can keep doing that, when you come back to the project, you come back with fresh eyes and things just shift. You can let go of stuff that you were holding on to before. And I think that's the thing with writer's block, is that often it's because you're holding on to something that you need to let go of. And one of the things I find the hardest, or have found the hardest, I've now just accepted it, is that often you don't discover what you're writing about until you're 3 drafts in. And it's like, no, how can this be? Why don't I know what I'm writing about? You think it's just, you have this idea and then it's all just going to flow down onto the page. It just doesn't work like that. Well, not for me. There's some geniuses out there that can do it, but I'm not that.
How do you approach dialogue?
I think you've got to be prepared to write really crap dialogue to start with. Just get it down on the page. I think if you worry too much about writing really great, believable dialogue to start with, you're just going to probably freeze. I think if you just let yourself write, just write it. Just write it bad. When I talk to producers, they talk about, here's the producer's bad version of what I think they should say here, but writers have their bad version that no one ever hopefully gets to see. And you write it, just get it down, and then again, put it aside, come back to it, and then you can see how truly bad it is. And you realise you're overwriting all the time, and you just got to cut and cut and cut. One other technique that I think is really worthwhile trying is forget about the computer, walk away from the computer, forget about writing it as a script. Grab a diary and start writing in the first person as if you're the character writing a diary entry, for example, or a letter to someone, or just jotting your thoughts down as you would if you're keeping a journal and you were that character. And little techniques like that, I think, can help you really enter the character more.
Which screenwriters inspire you, and what makes them inspiring?
I believe that Andrew Bovell, Australian writer who wrote Lantana, is a terrific writer. He's written for film and he writes for theatre, and he's someone I really admire. I think he's great. Guillermo Arriaga, a Mexican writer who wrote Babel. I think Guillermo is a terrific writer. I was actually fortunate when he was out here a couple of years ago that he looked at one of my scripts for me and completely ripped it apart. I was like, oh no, he's ripping it apart. Yeah, but it's him ripping it apart, so that's okay, you know. And he was completely right. So nothing like being annihilated by your heroes.
That seems to be more helpful than just people saying, yeah, it's quite good, and then not giving anything constructive.
You know, you need to be really, really mindful about who you give your script, you know, to read. Don't give it to your friends. Just don't. It doesn't make any sense. You're just putting them in a position where they feel obliged to tell you it's good, and it's not. It's probably going to be awful. So just, you know, give it to someone who really knows what they're talking about, and be robust. Before I started writing films, I worked in advertising, and I'm so used to having my precious words ripped apart by clients, you know, who really didn't know what they were talking about. But you just get used to saying, okay, maybe you're right, you know, but just take it on. You just take it on board. It doesn't mean to say they're right, but you've got to find readers that you really trust. I'm getting to know just other writers here in Auckland and find the ones that I think really are helpful. On a new project, I just had a friend who's a really good writer and director give me some feedback yesterday on my latest draft, and his insight was just so great. He's articulated exactly what I couldn't get to myself. So swap things around, find people that you trust, and get a writers and readers group together. But yeah, don't give it to your friends. They're too nice.
Don't get involved in anything that doesn't concern you. This is a very fragile balance here.